Hello all, sorry I'm late as so often I am. It's just a really good burrito. You ever run across a really good burrito and it's just important to finish it and eat it while it's still kind of warm and hot and all the burrito fillings haven't kind of congealed? Well, I did today run across that burrito and that's why I'm getting started late. I'm sure everyone understands. Uh, it won't happen again. That is likely to be the last burrito I have for the duration of the epidemic. Well, today I want to address a question that I get from viewers of this stream once in a while. Viewers who are aware, as many of you are, that I also put these videos up on YouTube. And people ask me, well, why are you choosing such clickbaity topics? Why is this just kind of a cynical attempt to chase clout, or what are you doing? Why are your videos such cynical clickbait? Well, I do take those criticisms seriously. Of course, I am pulling in all those views, and they will be dealt with appropriately. I will be taken into account for them. But they raise a question for me. Well, what does it mean for something to be cynical clickbait? What is that charge? What does that accusation mean? Well, so I did a little bit of word history research about it. But now there's this sense that cynicism means, and I take this definition from the WikiHow article, How to Become a Cynic. Cynicism means having a distrustful view of human motives, always construing the motives of others in the worst way possible, always assuming that others are kind of maximally self-interested, and that any kindness shown to you is actually a trick designed to manipulate you. So this constant suspicion. And cynicism can even mean, and I think this is what people mean when they say that I'm posting cynical clickbait. Cynicism can also mean manipulating others on the basis of that dim view of human motivations. On the basis of this idea that people are always just out to get stuff for themselves. That's a view that you can use to manipulate others as well as to govern your own behavior. Well, that kind of cynicism, that knowing view of human emotions and motivations as always self-interested, that's not always what cynicism meant. The slightly earlier period, in the Renaissance even, cynicism has the sense of just being misanthropic in general, having contempt for human things, not believing that humans are all necessarily motivated by greed or anything like that, but just having contempt for human affairs. Being a little bit melancholy, being kind of depressive, not having a sense for the world's pleasures. This is what cynicism used to mean in the Renaissance, and that meaning of the word, I think, owes a bit more to a guy named Diogenes of Sinope, the original cynic, first of the cynics. He's a guy from Sinope who moves to Athens because of reasons. We are going to talk about that later on. He acted extremely nasty. We're going to talk about that too. Just a nasty boy. And people said, "Hey, buddy, you're a dog." And Diogenes of Sinope said, "Yep." And that is how cynicism came to be called what it is, because the Greek word is for dog is kunos, is the genitive. So cynicism is simply dog-like behavior, being like a dog. Well, the question, I guess, then is what does it mean for a guy to be like a dog in ancient Greece? And it means, one thing for us today means something different for the ancient Greeks. Um, what it meant, according to the doxographical tradition, is a lot of kind of low stakes Seinfeld jokes. These kind of clever witticisms the Diogenes Laertius would say. Sort of like, what's the deal with fat people? How come they don't share? What's the deal with demagogues? How come they'll say everything to flatter the people? Um, what's the deal with sophists? How come they lie all the time? Anyway, things like that. Now, doxography, a word that I mentioned before, is really just kind of writing down opinions, is what it literally means. Um, it's a kind of genre of prose literature that's widespread in the ancient world that sort of records the views of philosophers. The placita philosophorum, the stuff that philosophers believed or thought. Now, our largest surviving representative of this genre from antiquity, confusingly by a guy also named Diogenes Laertius. That's a pseudonym. I'll go into that some other time. This book called The Lives of the Ancient Philosophers is, unfortunately for us, a whole mishmash of stuff, sources reliable and unreliable, and seems to be rather more interested in sick burns and gossip than in getting at what philosophers actually think. Now, there's this process you can kind of see going on with philosophers, and I talked about it with Pythagoras too, where a philosopher has kind of a reputation. For Pythagoras, it's a reputation as a mathematician. For Diogenes, it's a reputation as a harsh judge of human character, as a bit of a misanthrope. And on the basis of that reputation, stuff just gets attached to them by the historical tradition. More and more just kind of floating material gets attached to these particular big names. So in the case of Pythagoras, for instance, the Pythagorean theorem gets attached to him in the philosophical tradition. In the case of Diogenes, it's all these like bad Seinfeld jokes. He's got a reputation for misanthropy. As a result of that, these kind of misanthropic humors, this kind of misanthropic humor gets ascribed to him. So he gets this kind of whole sort of life history built on the basis of these sort of misanthropic jokes. And that life history matters a lot for the subsequent meaning of the word cynic. That's what basically produces the meaning of the word in the early modern period, when it does just mean a misanthrope, somebody who has contempt for other people, somebody who looks on luxury and beauty with this kind of jaundiced eye as material for humor rather than something to enjoy. And finally, the kind of knowing attitude towards human motivations that's suggested by a lot of this humor, I think gets us to the sort of modern dim view of human motivation, cynicism, the definition of the word in the present day. Having said all that, I think it's also worth trying to figure out, as we did with Pythagoras these many weeks back, sort of who Diogenes really is, or if we can get to anything real about Diogenes beneath this kind of doxographical scrap heap of terrible jokes. Well, the notional point of doxography is to give us a sense of the beliefs of philosophers, and some sections of Diogenes Laertius, because it is like a mishmash of stuff, of Diogenes Laertius's Lives of the Philosophers, are more reliable than others. So there's a chunk toward the end of the life of Diogenes of Diogenes of Sinope in the Lives of the Ancient Philosophers that does seem to be fairly reliable. It's just a straightforward account. It's not all of these bad jokes. And that bit of the text tells us something like the following: that Diogenes of Sinope was a guy who was notorious in Athens for having chosen a particular lifestyle. Aspects of the lifestyle that he chose are as follows. He does not like to live in a house or have objects or own objects. So he lives in a barrel instead of a house. Um, he has a cup, but then he sees a kid drinking water with his bare hands and he throws the cup away. He doesn't like having a lot of stuff. He's not really into living in a place or having private property either. He does seem to view all property as being essentially in common. Um, there are a few kind of bad jokes about how he thinks that all property belongs to philosophers, but in general, it seems like he treats property as basically being in common. If it's there and it's not nailed down, you can take it. He does bodily activities kind of wherever he feels like, instead of in the proper places for them. So, he'll just eat wherever. He'll eat off the ground in the marketplace. He also tends to masturbate wherever, which people hate. They really don't like that in Athens. But those are both, and he explicitly compares eating and masturbating as aspects of bodily needs. Those are both things that he does in the wrong place in public. And he begs shamelessly for stuff to support this weird lifestyle. He's known as a beggar. A lot of the kind of probably fake anecdotes about him do talk about begging. And then this is all dog stuff. It's stuff that dogs do. So hence the nickname, Kuon, which Diogenes is called, and which he says, yes, I am like that. I fawn on those that feed me, and I snap at those who do me harm, among other things that are dog-like that I do. Well, so plenty of people have had weird lifestyles in the past, but not all of them are remembered as philosophers, let alone the founder of a philosophical school. So I think we're further kind of pressed to ask, what exactly is the message here? What is the doctrine that Diogenes is sort of trying to push? Well, one construction that is sort of commonly put on this is that Diogenes' lifestyle is a way of exploring this distinction made by sophists and sort of further followed up by Plato and Aristotle in their own ways, this distinction between what's called nomos and physis. Physis is canonically just nature, stuff that is there without humans deciding it to be there. And nomos is the stuff that humans decide on. Nomos in Greece means law, but it also means custom. It's just stuff that humans decide on, stuff that Greeks knew varied between culture to culture, polis to polis. Nomos was fundamentally flexible. So Diogenes' lifestyle seems to be going really hard for physis as opposed to nomos. He doesn't respect the nomos of property. He doesn't respect the nomos of, style of living. He doesn't respect the nomos about times and places for eating or masturbating or other bodily activities. He doesn't respect the nomos that says begging is shameful. He rejects all of these nomoi, demonstrating by his own practice what a life according to physis would be like. And demonstrating by practice does count for ancient philosophers kind of a lot more than it does for modern ones. The point is kind of summed up by this story which is told about Diogenes and which shows up in enough different versions that there's probably a grain of truth to it. And that's that Diogenes of Sinope has his own kind of Delphic oracle episode, like Socrates does. You know how Socrates goes to the oracle, or his friend goes to the oracle actually, and asks who's wisest, and turns out that Socrates is the wisest of all people. And Socrates then just spends the rest of his life trying to figure out how on earth that could be true, because he knows he's a moron. But it turns out that everyone else is just less wise than him, because at least he knows that he knows nothing. Well, that's Socrates' oracle experience, and Diogenes of Sinope has a similar one, which involves essentially being told, it seems like, to paracharaxai to nomisma, deface the currency by the oracle at Apollo. Paracharaxai to nomisma. So nomisma is the coinage, that which is commonly accepted, related etymologically to nomos. Paracharaxai is to change the character, the image which is on the face of the coin. So Diogenes takes this initially as kind of career advice. Says, well, I guess that means I should be a forger. I should adulterate the currency. That turns out to be the wrong interpretation, and that's how he ends up at Athens, because at Sinope, if you get caught for forging, you get exiled. So obviously that was not what the oracle meant. Like most oracles, the oracle at Delphi gives that end up recorded in literature, this one has a kind of a double meaning. The real meaning is this, that the image, the character, the thing that makes the nomisma the nomisma, that's nomos. It's merely convention. It's what's stamped on the bare metal, which is physis. So there's this distinction between stamp and metal content that Diogenes, or the oracle at Delphi via Diogenes, seems to be mapping onto the distinction between nomos and physis. The only way to tell, actually, what the true metal content of a Greek coin is, at this point, prior to discoveries about density, which can be used to check the same thing, is to deform it a little bit. Roughly, you can bite it to see how much how malleable it is, which will tell you how much gold or silver is in it, or you can melt it down, utterly remove the image on the coin, to test the nature of the metal which it contains. And this seems to be the practice that Diogenes of Sinope actually undertakes, melting down the human coin, removing all nomos from it, in order to discover what the metal really is. What is the physis of man without the kind of addition of nomos? It's a radical solution, and it leads Diogenes into some strange situations. For instance, having to piss on his friends like a dog. Well, but maybe that's what human nature is actually like once you take the nomoi away. So that's the original cynicism. Cynicism is the practice of becoming animal in the sense of abandoning the nomoi that are distinctively human, simply in order to explore what the nature of the human animal is once you get past those nomoi. What is the good of finding this out, though? What good are word histories in general? I mean, etymologies don't tell us what the true meaning of a word is. It's not like suddenly now cynic means not what I said it did at the outset, taking a dim view of human motivations, but instead rejecting convention and trying to explore human nature. It's not like our having discovered this origin of the word changes its meaning now. The current usage is not somehow wrong vis-a-vis origin. The meaning of the word is just changed. But when we realize how that meaning has changed, then we recognize that there is an alternative way of constructing the word that gives us access to the world of the past in a different way than we had before. Once we know what the word meant, we're one step closer to having that kind of an ancient brain that's going to allow us to explore the world of ancient Greece in this case more closely, rather than from afar and through this kind of screen. The other thing is that the story of how the meaning of the word has changed and what it's come to mean tells us something about the situation that we're in right now, the world in which cynicism has taken on this other meaning that it's come to take on. And there's this notion of cynical reason that's introduced by a guy named Peter Sloterdijk, which runs like this. He's trying to diagnose kind of the dilemma, the source of the political malaise of people in the Western world in the 80s and 90s. What happened to the idea that we could make the world better, that we could improve the world that we live in? And this is an idea that's probably going to seem familiar to you because you will have encountered people who are like this. People who say, I know exactly how the system works. Of course, it's a rigged game. It's set up so that we, the people, always lose. Everyone knows how the system works, but you can't beat it. You'd be a fool for trying, and you're just wasting time pointing out how rigged and terrible the system is. Well, this perspective is, I don't know, a good one from which to understand systems of oppression, I suppose. It's pretty widespread in academia. It's an attitude that is rewarding in the sense that it makes you seem quite knowing, and it gives you some justification for seeing yourself as superior to those other idealistic dupes who are still trying to fix things or whatever. That kind of cynical reason is, of course, one way of interpreting cynicism and one way of pursuing politics in a kind of a modern key, one that's sort of particularly successful, it seems like, in these opening years of the 21st century. The alternative is to see that, as Diogenes of Sinope himself realized, nothing is real. Nothing of nomos is real. None of these laws which have been made or customs that we have established are fixed forever, are eternal. The system is rigged, but we can fix it. We can pursue radical political change through action, through changing our own lives, as Diogenes of Sinope changed his life. We can oppose power in much the same way, perhaps, as Diogenes of Sinope did, simply by ignoring it. We can live our lives as a sort of recovery mission for mankind's free nature. Well, that's a tough ask, and you can have your pick of options there, but Diogenes of Sinope is kind of a banner carrier for option number 2. And what the history of the word cynicism shows us, I think, is just the difficulty of not falling into option 1. Falling into this kind of cynical reason where misanthropy ends up justifying inaction or despair. Well, on that note, I will see everybody around the bend next week.